record now for all those who are going to watch later, because there will be people watching later. Muy buenos días, buenos días.
Buenos
Llovió.
días.
¿Cómo están ustedes? ¿Cómo están ustedes? So the prize expression for today is, because this is really advanced, and I'm going to put it in the chat box. Anoche llovió a cántaros. Anoche llovió a cántaros. Last night it rained cats and dogs. That's the way you say cats and dogs. They do not use gatos y perros. They don't use that expression. Cántaros are jugs. So this is saying it's like jugs were pouring, which makes more sense than cats and dogs, doesn't it? So, llovió a cántaros. If you want to say it's raining cats and dogs right now, because llovió is past, you express that as, got fingers going here. Está lloviendo a cántaros, meaning it's happening right now. Está lloviendo a cántaros. So raining jugs of water, which is surely what it was doing. And I'll be pulling weeds from now until October. It is really sad. Okay. Vamos a empezar con una pregunta que recibí de Roger. I'm going to start with a little kind of a preview that I got from Roger, a question. And this is going to walk just a couple steps back to this idea of adjetivos, adjectives. So we're going to spend most of our day today on verbs, not on adjectives, but we'll preface class with a little bit of a follow-up on adjectives. I'm going to put my share screen on here so you can see what his question was about. Aquí viene Shalice. Here comes Shalice. So we're going to spend maybe just 5 or 10 minutes on adjectives. 5 minutos, 10 minutos, nada más, just a little bit, because we need to dive in pretty heavy duty with verbs today and then next week, because I'm giving you guys one extra week. So, adjetivos. Now, this is a question which was actually a really, really excellent question. And what I'm going to tell you is it's not a game changer. It doesn't prevent somebody from understanding what you are saying if you get it wrong. But the question was, if we're looking at these pictures, why is it un nuevo zapato, but son zapatos viejos? Well, first of all, I have with the crummy looking shoes that are plural, son zapatos nuevos. That's a whole sentence because it's got a verb. You have to have a verb to have a whole sentence. Son zapatos viejos, they are old shoes. Generally, that is the order of adjectives. Most adjectives follow the nouns they talk about. So most descriptive words follow the thing they're describing. That's the opposite of what we do. We say old shoes, they'll say shoes old. But it is kind of common to hear, and this one is not a sentence when we're looking at the high heel. Un nuevo zapato, a new shoe. Sometimes with some of these words like new and old, don't be surprised if you see nuevo zapato, new shoe with the word new preceding it. With certain adjectives like new or old, sometimes that comes in front of the adjective like we do in English. Especially with that word new, nuevo. Viejos has kind of different meanings if it follows a noun or if it's in front of a noun. And I'm going to do a little extra slide box to show you generally when it does, when it is a game changer. Let's look at the word viejo, because that one is a really specific one. Chiquitito, chiquitito. This is so tiny. No one would be able to see this ever. Especially with this word viejo. Es un viejo amigo. Es un viejo amigo. With this special word viejo, old, if I put viejo in front of a noun, it changes the meaning a little bit. So, es un viejo amigo. He's an old friend, meaning he's a friend I've had for a very long time. Okay? He's an old friend. But es un amigo viejo changes the nuance of that word viejo. He's a friend who's old. He's an elderly guy. Un viejo amigo could be a guy who's 20 years old. If you've been friends since you were 5, es un viejo amigo could be used to talk about that 20-year-old guy. Es un viejo amigo. He's an old friend. I've had this friend since I was a teeny tiny kid. But es un amigo viejo. He's a friend who happens to be an old guy. So just so you know, viejo can kind of change in meaning. There are a few nouns in Spanish that do that. A few. A few adjectives in Spanish that do that. A few adjectives. But in general, most of the time, the adjective will be behind. With nuevo, sometimes it doesn't matter that much. Okay, how do you decide? I would say, as a rule of thumb, most adjectives you use, like 90% of them, are going to follow the noun. They won't do this un nuevo zapato thing. They'll do things like es un carro barato, it's a cheap car. Un Ferrari es un carro caro. Es un edificio alto, es un edificio bajo. Son pantalones cortos, son pantalones largos. Usually 90% of the time, the adjectives will follow the nouns I talk about. So here's the rule of thumb, which is kind of easy to figure out. Most of these adjectives, well, they're descriptive words. Of course they describe, but if they paint a picture in your head, they will generally follow the noun, the thing, or the person they're talking about. 90% of the time is a good rule of thumb. Okay. Adjectives that come in front of the nouns they talk about. Most of the time, unlike viejo, unlike that, most adjectives that come in front of the noun tend to be adjectives that talk about quantity. Like, hay muchos pantalones aquí. There are lots of pants here if you have them all folded up after doing your laundry. Or hay mucha gente aquí. Gente is a general word for people. Hay mucha gente aquí. There are lots of people here. Necesito pocas palabras. Necesito pocas palabras para describir. I need very few words to describe. Pocas would be just a few. So words that talk about quantities will come in front, like poco, mucho. Numbers will always come in front of the noun, the thing that they're describing. But most things that paint a picture of how something visually really looks, they'll follow the noun, the thing or person they're describing. That's a good rule of thumb. Viejo and nuevo are kind of flexible. They're a little bit flexible. And if you reverse the order and get it wrong, you're not going to cause a huge amount of confusion speaking to somebody with adjectives. So don't let that throw you off. If you say son zapatos vieja, that will sound really off. because vieja would be a feminine description, talking about zapatos, which are plural and masculine things. That would be something that would throw people off a little bit. They would still understand you, but it would sound really like, would be giving that, it would make them kind of scrunch up their eyebrows a little bit thinking about what you're saying, because it doesn't match up in their brains. And they would say, why did you say that? Why did he say that? So we'll do a lot more with all these adjectives as reviews when we start back in fall session, because this is something that people always need practice on, always need reminders of. So we're going to leave that for now, unless you've got a question about an adjective that is pressing. Does that make sense to you, Roger?
Yes, that's
okay.
That's
and
good.
I think French does, because you've studied some French. I think French does kind of a similar thing with some of their words like old and new and things like that, probably because of the Latin connection. I don't know that for sure, but probably because of that. Okay. We're going to leave that for now, because we're going to dive into, we're going to deep dive. We're going to do a big dumpster dive on the whole topic of verbs. And verbs are sometimes a very scary topic for people who speak English, because we have many fewer forms for verbs than they do in Spanish. So we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about these verbs and why are they important and why does it matter how we use verbs. So verbs are action words. If you read that chapter in the book, you probably figured that out. Verbs are action words, and verbs tell you what is happening. Okay, so in English, we actually have what they call conjugations. That means you take the basic form of the verb and you alter it somewhat to tell who is doing the action. So we're going to look at how that works in English and maybe why that causes us difficulty when we move into Spanish or French or German or pretty much any of those languages. Okay, we're going to take a really easy verb. A really easy verb. I don't want to do hablar because everybody does hablar, but we're going to do to chat. We're going to take the English side first. To chat. To chat means that you're not talking about anything profound, right? To chat. In English, before you conjugate a verb, you always have to think about what's the base form of the verb. And the base form of the verb is called the infinitive. And the infinitive does not mean it is infinite. It goes on and on there forever. It's just a grammatical term. What you need to know is that an infinitive in English always starts with the word to, T-O. And there are two separate words. The action itself is chat. But the infinitive, the baseline form, if you will, always has that word to in English. So to chat is the infinitive, but when we conjugate it, basically we're saying we take this infinitive to chat and we alter its form somewhat to tell who is doing the action. So it would be I chat, you chat. Ooh, it's the same. He or she chats. Chats. Oh, we have to put an S on the end. That S doesn't mean plural. It means he or she is doing it. We chat, they chat. And if we're talking about you guys, a bunch of people, chat. So it's either chat or chats. That's it. Wow. 2 whole conjugations. And most verbs in English do that. You know, the part where it gets complicated in English is when we have things like I am, you are, he is, she is, they are, we are. Wow, yeah, to be, to be in English is very, very irregular, just like to be in Spanish is very irregular. And boy, am, are, is sure don't look like be. So yeah, in most languages, at least Western languages, to be, German, French, whatever, it always winds up being a weird verb, something that does not look like the original to be. So, okay, that one in English is tough. But if you take out an irregular like to be, most English verbs are like to chat, to spit, I spit, he spits, they spit, we spit, to weed, to take out, to eat, I eat, you eat, they eat, she eats with an S, and that's it. There are two forms. Well, okay, so in English, a lot of native English speakers are like, why is this verb thing such a pain in the behind? How come you got so darn many conjugations of verbs? Well, you do, because in Spanish, they just do. The verb winds up telling what the action is, chat. It tells who does it, I, you, he, she, they, we, and it tells when it's being done. Is it being done right now? In which case it's what we call present, presente. Oh, did it happen 5 hours ago or yesterday? In which case it's a past. Oh, is it something that will happen in the future? In which case it's a future. So those are what we call tenses, okay? So we're going to be looking at just purely present tense, plain old present tense. And these present tense conjugations are going to mean that somebody is doing something, or some people are doing something, okay? Technically, when you conjugate a verb in Spanish, if I were to take to chat, platicar. Platicar means to chat, and it's a regular verb, platicar, platicar. Platicar, when we conjugate that in present tense, it could be conjugating for someone is chatting, someone chats, or wow, they sure do chat. Present tense in Spanish can be translated into any of those ideas. Is chatting, chats, or wow, they sure do chat a lot. Or somebody really does chat on and on. You can never shut them up. Okay. So when we conjugate that verb platicar, it will, in present tense, have the same meaning in English as any one of these three expressions. Okay, it's happening now. Okay. So in English, an infinitive has the word to on it. In Spanish, infinitives, the base form of the verb, before we conjugate it, they'll be in three categories. One of three categories. And the category will be, they're either a verb that ends in AR. They're not going to have the word to in front of them. They'll end in an AR like platicar, or they'll end in ER, or they'll end in IR. There are three categories of verbs in Spanish, and those are the three categories. AR verbs, as we call them, ER verbs, and IR verbs. And the tail end of the word, the base form, before you conjugate it, will be an AR, an ER, or an IR. Okay. When we conjugate a verb and we tell who is doing the action, the very first step we have to do is take off the AR, whoops, or the ER, or the IR. We have to get rid of that little tail end first. before we actually alter it into a verb that means something, that tells who's doing that action. So let's look at platicar as an example, because everybody and their uncle uses hablar, to speak. But we're going to look at platicar. So what's going to happen is we're going to take away the AR from platicar, and we've got platic. Okay, we get rid of the AR first. And we're going to look at AR verbs first, because AR verbs are, as a matter of fact, they are so abundant. If you made a pie chart of all the verbs in Spanish, AR verbs would be like 60 or 70% of all the verbs there are in the whole language. AR are by far the most common, the most frequently used verbs in the language. They're just abundant. Okay, but we have to get rid of that AR. And then we're going to have endings that often have sounds in them. We have to tag special endings onto the end of this platique thing here to tell who's doing it. And O at the end is not masculine. It's not masculine because this is not an it is not a noun, and it is not an adjective. It is a verb. And an O at the end of a verb means yo, I'm doing it. Platico means I'm chatting. Platico con mi vecino. I'm chatting with my neighbor. Platico con ustedes. I'm chatting with you guys. If we want to keep yo in the group, but yo is only one person, I, myself. If we want to keep you in the group, but I want to say we're doing this, like I want to say all of us together here on the Zoom call, we're chatting. Instead of having an O at the end, it'll be amos at the end. Platicamos. Platicamos. Platicamos means we're chatting, or we do chat, or we chat once in a while, it's present, okay? Platico, I'm chatting, I'm doing it. Platicamos, yo, I got people with me, okay? And people will not usually bother to say yo platico. Most of the time, they will not bother with the word yo. It'll be just platico. It'll be not nosotros platicamos, it'll be platicamos without the nosotros. So one of the benefits of conjugations is that once you conjugate the verb, in most cases, everybody knows who's doing something just by looking at the verb. And we often don't name that person. It's very, very common to not name the person. Okay, what if you want to say you are doing this thing of chatting? Then we take platicar and we change into platicas. You are chatting, okay? We're going to skip the plural of tú because that's only used in Spain. We're going to look about what if it's not tú platicas, and notice it's got an S at the end. That S doesn't make it plural, right? The AS tells you, oh, this is an AR verb, and the S at the end tells you, I'm talking to somebody directly. I'm addressing that person in a familiar you way, okay? What if I want to say just one person is doing this, and I don't mean you? Well, I could mean you if it were usted, but just platica, platica. Just that little at the end because it comes from an AR verb. He or she is chatting, okay? And if I want to say that more than one person is doing it, they are doing it. Platican. There you go. AR
And
verbs.
how would we ask, how would we invite someone to have a chat, or let's have a chat, or
let's have a chat. And you're just doing it as a yes/no question, right, Charlize?
Sure, or an invitation to have the conversation.
Yeah. Platicamos un poco. Platicamos un poco. Shall we chat a little bit?
Un
Platicamos un
poco means a
poco.
little bit.
Bit. Platicamos un poco. Oh, platicamos. You could rephrase that a different way and say platicamos unos minutos, a few minutes. Yeah, yeah. Okay. And platicar is a very, very kind of a friendly way of chatting, right? The verb that everybody uses to teach this form, and it's almost overused, is hablar. Hablar means to speak, right? And platicar is chat, but hablar, you know, hablo. We'll take a look at how hablar looks. Hablo inglés, hablo inglés, hablo inglés. Hablo inglés, I speak English, right? But if we speak English, it's hablamos inglés. And you want to ask somebody, ¿hablas inglés? ¿Hablas inglés? Do you speak English? Or habla inglés. One person speaks English. And this one person form, habla, can also be used for usted, okay? Because one person, whether it's él, he, one male person, or ella, she, one female person, or usted. Él and ella and usted always share the same form. And it is called third person singular because it talks about one person. And I know you isn't third person, it's second person, but usted shares that same verb form, the same kind of verb form that él takes, that ella takes. So habla. And then if we talk about a group of people, or if we talk about ustedes, oops, it'll be hablan, hablan, okay? So what I want you to notice is that a pattern is going to start to fall off for a regular verb, and we're looking just at ARs right now. For a regular verb, will always mean I'm doing it. As a matter of fact, for all three verbs, AR verbs, ER verbs, IR verbs, is always the ending for yo, for it's happening right now. Always. All three of those share the same thing for yo. If it ends in o, if that action word, not a noun, not an adjective, if the action word ends in an o, it means I'm doing it. The o has nothing to do with gender when we use it with a verb, okay? As, with an S at the end, is not going to mean plural. It's going to mean tú, you. You're talking directly to the person in a friendly tú way, right? You're not, you don't address them by their last name. You address them by their first name. Oh, yay, it's an AR verb. So just that little naked vowel hanging there by itself means one person is doing that. Okay. That most thing, and now it's going to have an in front of it because it's an AR verb. That's going to mean we're doing this. And anytime you've got an N at the end of a verb, it's going to mean they are doing this. Or it could mean ustedes, you guys are doing this. And the AN means it's an AR verb. So, hablo inglés, hablas inglés. Habla inglés, una persona habla inglés. Hablamos, I'm in the group. Hablan, couple people. 100 people, 2 people. It's more than one. Okay, hablan inglés. So, AR verbs that are regular will always follow this predictable pattern. How do you know that a verb is regular? Well, sadly, you just have to know. You get to know from hearing a bunch of them. There are going to be verbs that are irregular, but a regular AR verb, which is going to cover vast amounts of territory, it will do this. Okay. One verb they had in your book, because they had this in the following directions chapter. And you may not have noticed that they were using this for this reason, but I noticed this. Llegar means to arrive. To arrive. Okay. But in English, sometimes we might use a different verb where in Spanish they use llegar. So if we say to get to a place, like you're asking for directions, how do I get to the store? How do I get to the church? How do I get to the museum? Whereas in English, we would say, how do I get to? They won't use get in Spanish. They'll use the verb arrive, llegar. It's just what they use. So when you want to say, how do I get to a place? This is the verb people will use. Or if you say, I get there early always, I get there late. This is the get to a place verb. It is llegar. So you might want to check out that little chapter where they have just llegar. The forms are llego. It's an AR verb and it's regular. So llego, I get to a place. The question they posed was, oops, ¿cómo llego a and a place? ¿Cómo llego a? How do I get to? Literally, you ask that as, how do I arrive at? ¿Cómo llego a tu oficina? How do I get to your office? Ajá. ¿Cómo llego a tu casa? How do I get to your house? ¿Cómo llego al museo? How do I get to the museum? ¿Cómo llego a la estación de tren? How do I get to the train station? ¿Cómo llego al aeropuerto? How do I get to the airport? ¿Cómo llego al hotel? How do I get to the hotel? So this is used both for asking directions and to say things like, llego a las 8. I'm getting there at 8. Llego temprano a mi oficina. I get to my office early. Okay, so, but llego tells I am doing it and I don't need the word yo. Llego. Okay, if I want to keep myself in the group, but I've got a group, it's llegamos. Okay, if I want to talk about tú, you in a friendly way, it's llegas. I'll show you what the vosotros, the tú plural form. You're not going to hear it anywhere in Mexico, but in Spain they use that word llegáis. Okay, so now you've seen it, but you don't need to use it anywhere in this hemisphere. They don't bother with that. To say that one person is getting to a place, llega, él or ella or usted. And to say that a bunch of people are getting to a place, it's llegan. So this pattern will hold true for all AR verbs. And you always need to alter that verb. Now, the reason that most native English speakers really have a hard time with this is that I have uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, 5, and if you go to Spain, 6, I've got to have 5 different forms of that verb. And in English, all I did was 1, 2 forms. You gotta work harder at it, right? In English, it's arrive or arrives, and that's the end of the story. So a lot of English speakers, this is a hump, a speed bump we have to get over, that we need to know how to use this verb. But the verb tells the story. It tells the action by just the infinitive itself. It tells who does it by that conjugation ending. And it tells when. These are all present tense. So past tense will look different than and sound different than these. Okay. And future will sound different than these. But these are present tense, something happening right now. Okay. Do you want to stop me with any question before we move on? Because we're going to see a lot of these examples. No? Okay. Vale, magnifico. We're going to look at lots and lots of examples. Muchísimos ejemplos. So what's going to help? We're going to just look at some AR verbs first to kind of get this embedded in our brains. And by the way, I am going to send you off with some videos. I'll show you what the videos are going to look like. There are going to be 2 videos to watch for later this week. They'll look like this guy, Danny from Language Tutor. He's going to explain what happens with AR verbs. So he's going to show it with a chart. And the chart usually helps people. But the only problem with the chart is going to be, and it's a small problem, the chart is really great when you want to organize in your head that yo is up here, nosotros is up here, and it means yo plus somebody else. Tú is always in this category. One person is always in this category. A 2 people combo is always in this category. First person singular, first person plural, second person one, third person singular, third person plural. But the problem is when you walk up to somebody and you ask them a question, some English speakers start like putting this as number 1, number 2, number 3, and you got to be able to mix these up. Okay. So if you walk up to somebody sitting in a cafe, the joke that used to be told was a young 20-year-old guy sees a gorgeous girl sitting at a cafe and he wants to say, will you have a coffee with me? And he goes through the yo and the tú before he gets to the third one, which is the right verb he needs to use because he doesn't know her yet. And he'd have to use the usted verb form. So you got to be able to look at this chart as ways of knowing who's doing the action, but you can't take it as number 1, number 2, number 3. You got to think of who's the person I'm talking to or who am I talking about? And that, you know, you pick your verb from that chart then that way. Okay, so what we're going to start to do right now is to get familiar with different kinds of AR verbs. I've got to find my right. Yeah. Okay. What you're going to need to do eventually is to kind of curate a whole bunch of verbs as verbs that will be frequently used verbs, okay? Verbs that will be common. So what will be more important for today actually will be to get to know what do the infinitives mean before we conjugate them. What do these infinitives mean? Because you could conjugate and put things in charts, but if you don't know what the verb means, it doesn't do you any good to conjugate the verbs. So we're going to need to get familiar with a whole bunch of infinitives, just action words and what they mean. And I'm going to tell you that your chapter 7, siete, out of this book starts to introduce you to a whole bunch of infinitives. So if you were to look at en la página 97, on page 97, you will see that they list right in the middle on where it says grammar builder, they start to list a whole bunch of infinitives, meaning the to plus the action word. Escuchar, to listen, viajar, to travel, hablar, to speak, caminar, to walk, comprar, to buy, pagar, to pay, usar, to use. Oh, yay, that one is a cognate. It looks like use. It sounds like use. It means use. Yay, usar. Llegar, to arrive or get to a place. Bailar, to dance. Well, are you going to use that as a traveler? Maybe not. Estudiar, to study. They start to give you a common set of infinitives that are frequently used. And then they give you a chart to show you all of these endings, the verb conjugation endings. So that's how they begin. But I'm going to share with you a kind of different resource. And you do not need to write these down. I want you to be a big sponge and just kind of take this in. These are meant to, it's kind of hard to say what verbs will you need. As a traveler, that can vary a lot. As a tourist, we can kind of predict certain things that you might need, certain verbs you might need, because often when you're a tourist, you're talking about, what languages you speak to let people know I might be a little slow at this thing you called Spanish. People talk about working, you might want to ask who works here. You might want to talk about where do I pay? You might want to tell people again, oh, shoot, I'm kind of slow because I'm just studying Spanish and they know you're a beginner. Yeah. People may talk to you about listening for something. Yeah. We talk about buying things. Oh, we've got this wonderful verb, which we're going to talk about a lot, tomar, to take. We're going to take that as a big example later. Tocar, which means to play an instrument. It also means to touch something. You may see signs that say don't touch because you're in a glass or ceramic store. No toques, don't touch stuff. Yeah. Necesitar, momento. Necesitar, necesitar, which means to need. You might want to express to somebody, I need something. You might want to express to somebody, I am looking for something. To say, I look for something. I'm looking for something. It is buscar, to look for. And cocinar, to cook. If you're in a restaurant, they may talk about how they're cooking something, how they prepare something, okay? But I would say as a tourist, como turista, that verb pagar will be really important. Hablar, you want to talk to people about which language you speak, right? Best, and which one maybe you struggle with. Comprar, when you want to tell somebody that you want to buy something. Tomar, this one is super important because it's used a bunch of ways. So we'll come back to that soon. Necesitar, when you want to tell somebody I need something, and buscar, when you want to tell somebody you're looking for something. And really important to know, this word buscar, the word for in look for is built into that verb. You don't need an extra Spanish word that means for. The for idea is built into that verb. Okay. And we'll come back to that in a minute. So I'm going to send you the whole link to this. Don't furiously copy stuff, but just kind of look at this. Oh, here are these verb endings with hablar. Everybody uses hablar because to speak is one of those basic verbs that people use up a lot. Hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, habláis, hablan. And people won't bother to use those things, those words in parentheses. Most of the time they won't bother. They might bother a little more with this word habla to include the human being Or with the term, with the verb hablan, they might bother to tell you because hablan can mean a bunch of male people, a bunch of female people, a mixed group. It can mean you guys. They might throw in the person they're talking about, maybe. But they won't bother with tú, they won't bother with yo, they won't bother with nosotros most of the time. French and German, you gotta have those words I, you. Spanish, they don't bother with it. They gloss over it most of the time. Okay, let's look at kind of a, well, I won't say silly, but tocar, to play an instrument, not to play a game, play an instrument. This is play an instrument. Tocar el piano, to play the piano becomes toco el piano, I play piano. Tocas el piano, you play piano. Luis toca el piano, one person's plays. Marta toca el piano. I might include her name because I want to indicate this person does it. Usted toca el piano. Tocamos el piano. Tocáis only in Spain. Luis y Juan tocan el piano. Maybe I want to name specifically these two guys. This is what they play. Marta y Carla tocan el piano. Ustedes, you guys, tocan el piano. That'd be just another AR verb example. Escuchar, to listen to. This is also frequently used. So we want to show you examples. Escucho la música. Escucho jazz. I listen to jazz. Escucho la música rock. I listen to rock music. Escuchas. You listen to. Escuchas la música. Berto escucha la música. And notice that does not mean feminine because the is tagged onto a verb. On the end of an action means it's a conjugation. It does not mean feminine. Berto, a guy, with escucha is perfectly correct because escucha does not mean feminine. It means AR verb. One person is doing this. Berto escucha la música. Ana escucha la música. Usted escucha la música. Okay. Escuchamos la música. Berto y Luis escuchan la música. Ana y Carla escuchan la música. Ustedes escuchan la música. Okay. If we turn any of these into a question, generally, in most cases, we just flip the verb to the first word when we ask. So if you were to change these facts, statements of facts into a question, usually the verb comes first. So, escucha Berto la música? Escucha Berto la música? Usually we flip the verb in front of the person it talks about to turn it into a question. And our voice has to trail up. You could leave it just as Berto escucha la música. Is Berto using that? And use your voice to trail up. But it is frequent to say, escucha Berto la música. Is Berto listening to music? Okay. Bien. So we're just looking at examples. Let's try to conjugate these verbs. We got a bunch of AR verbs at the top. Pagar, to pay. The most important thing for you to start to get used to is what these infinitives mean, because you will practice conjugations over and over for a long time, for weeks and weeks, until it feels natural. Pagar, to pay. Tomar. Tomar, muy importante. Tomar generally can mean about 3 different things. Tomar can mean to take something. Tomo el libro. Tomo mis libros. Tomo mis libros. I'm taking my books. To take something. Physically take it. Okay. But tomar can also mean to take a mode of transportation. Tomar el autobús, to take. And that doesn't mean I'm picking up and carrying it. It means I want to take the bus. It means I want to get on the bus. Tomar el autobús. Tomar el metro, take the subway. Tomar un taxi, take a taxi. To take a mode of transportation. Tomar, muy importante. And besides physically take or take transportation, tomar is also used for eating and drinking stuff. Especially drinking stuff, you know, have a glass of water, have a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea. Tomar un café. If somebody asks you, tomas un café conmigo, tomas un café conmigo, will you have a cup of coffee with me? Conmigo, with me. Tomas un café, will you have a cup? And they're asking, will you take a cup of coffee with me? Will you drink a cup of coffee with me? Tomar can also be used to eat. So tomar can mean to eat, to drink, to take a mode of transportation, to take an object, like off the counter, if you're in a store. Tomar, and you know from context. You know from context. A waiter walks up to you, you're sitting at a cafe, and he's never going to talk to you with tú. Unless he's 20 and you're 20, in which case they'll address each other as tú frequently. But if he's a waiter and you're the age you are, he's going to address you as usted. And he may say, ¿Qué toma usted? ¿Qué toma usted? ¿Qué toma usted? ¿Qué toma? What will you have? ¿Qué toma usted? He's asking for your drink order. What will you drink? Okay, so tomar, out of all this big group, is probably as important as pagar, because you may want to use that verb tomar to talk about taking a taxi, getting something to drink, right? Or getting an object. So pagar, to pay, tomar, a bunch of meanings, cocinar, to cook, food, cocinar. Like cocina means a kitchen, the place, la cocina. Cocinar is the action you do in the cocina, en la cocina. Cocinar, to cook. Buscar, to look for, to seek out something. So when you want to say, I'm looking for a souvenir, I'm looking for a shirt, I'm looking for shoes, you need this verb, buscar. Buscar is to look for, to seek something out. To look for a person, we also use buscar. Okay? Trabajar, to work. Trabajar, to work. And necesitar, to need. And yay, necesitar is kind of a cognate, meaning, wow, it looks like necessity. It must be necessary. Yeah. Necesitar is to need, because something is necessary to you. So necesitar, we can figure out what that means usually. But here are the endings we will use when we conjugate these verbs. So let's see if you can take pagar. We're going to take the first one off the list. Pagar. How are you going to change that verb pagar to say I pay? I pay.
Pago.
Pago. So here's how you may want to use this verb. You want to ask when you're buying something, can I pay with cash or with a credit card? Yeah, there's a common thing a tourist needs. And you're going to start the question with the yo verb. Pago. Pago con. Do I pay with? Pago con. Do I pay with? Pago con tarjeta, meaning a card, debit or charge. Pago con tarjeta o con efectivo. Efectivo sounds like effective. It means cash. Pago con tarjeta o efectivo. Or the clerk may ask you as, are you paying with a card or with cash? And he'll ask it as usted. So he'll have to ask it as paga, and he may not bother to say usted. If he's looking at you in the eye across the counter, he may use usted, he may choose to skip usted. Paga con efectivo o con tarjeta. He just wants to know if you're paying with cash or with a credit card or a debit card. So that verb pagar, importante. Pago, I pay. Pagas, you pay. One person or usted is paga. ¿Cómo se dice we're paying? You want to tell a waiter we're paying with cash. How do we change pagar to say we're paying?
Pagamos.
Pagamos. Pagamos con efectivo. We're paying with cash. Pagamos con efectivo. Okay. And if the waiter comes up to, there are two of you sitting at a table, he won't ask it as usted, he'll ask it as ustedes. ¿Pagan ustedes con efectivo? ¿Pagan ustedes con tarjeta? Tarjeta is a card. ¿Pagan ustedes? Are you guys paying? Okay, so pagar. Let's look at tomar. Muy importante. This is a really, really essential verb because if I want to talk about I'm taking a subway, I'm taking a taxi, I'm taking a bus, or I'm having a cup of coffee, I want a drink. We'll use tomar a lot. Okay. La forma de yo. What's the form of yo for tomar?
Tomo.
Tomo. That's it. You won't bother with yo. Tomo. The tu form for tomar.
Tomás.
Tomas. Tomas. Okay. Tomas. And we punch the O. Tomas. Okay. How do you say one person is having something? Like having a coffee. Toma. One person, not yo. One person. Toma. Toma. Juan toma café. Ana toma té. Luis toma agua. They're each drinking different things. ¿Cómo se dice we're taking? Nosotros. Nosotros tomar.
So, tomamos.
Tomamos. Amos. We punch the a part. Tomamos. 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 They take will be toman. Toman. Bien? Toman. Okay, so tomo, tomas, toma, tomamos, toman. Bien? Right? Cocino starts to sound like cocino, I'm cooking. Cocinas, you're cooking. Cocina, he's cooking or she's cooking, or the formal usted, you're cooking. Cocinamos, we're cooking. Cocinan, they're cooking, or you guys are cooking. Cocinan, bien? Okay?
Marilyn,
Buscar.
how
Sí,
do you,
sí.
how do you figure where to put the accent when you?
Which syllable to punch more?
Yeah.
Which syllable to punch more? Que buena
Yeah.
pregunta. Let's take a quick look at that because that'll make you feel more comfortable, probably. Yeah, which syllable gets the emphasis? Which syllable gets the emphasis? Huh. It's actually predictable, but it may feel overwhelming. So we'll let's take tomar. Let's take tomar, and we're going to lay out all of our conjugations. Ooh, and you're going to notice, I'm going to leave this one in. Normally I wouldn't do it, but you're going to notice, wait a minute, that one's got an accent mark. Well, how come? Okay, most of these have no accent marks, but anybody who knows the rules, because there are rules in English, we don't have accent marks in English unless it comes from a foreign word, right? Yeah, so you just have to know. Oh, that's uncomfortable. You just have to know. In Spanish, you will automatically know. A word that has no written accent mark, if you don't see a written accent mark, you automatically know which syllable gets the punch. You know because you look at the last letter of the word. Ooh, I'm going to type this out. And this is any word. Verbs, adjectives, nouns, conjunctions, anything, any word whatsoever. If the last letter of a word is a vowel, or the letter N, or the letter S, then naturally, with no accent mark needed, you, let's call it punch the second to last syllable more. You put more emphasis on the second to last, or as my husband likes to say, the penultimate. Not the last syllable, the second to last. So that's a general rule. Unless you see an accent mark, any word whatsoever, if it ends in a vowel, an S, or an N. Ooh, we got an S. Second to last syllable gets more punch. So last syllable is the mo, right? So we punch this in more. Tomo, tomo. Last syllable is that mas thing. Tomas. That gets more emphasis. Toma. Ooh. Here's a second to last syllable. Tomamos. So not tomamos, it's tomamos. The second to the last syllable is tomamos. Ooh. Let's skip this for now. Second to the last syllable is toman. Second to the last syllable gets more punch. Look at what happened here. Last word, or excuse me, last letter is an S. If we followed the rule, it ought to be this, but the way people say this breaks the rule. When you see an accent mark, it means watch out. This is breaking the rule, and here's what I punch instead. Most of the time, 80% of the time, an accent mark tells you we're breaking a rule and we're punching this sound instead. So we're going to write an accent mark to tell you this is the sound that gets more punch. It's not what you think it should be. It breaks the rule. We're going to punch this sound instead. An accent mark only happens over a vowel, never over a consonant, And it happens because we're breaking a rule. And the way that people pronounce this breaks the rule. So we're gonna, when we write it out, we're gonna write that accent mark in there to show you where we do punch it harder. So that would be pronounced tomais, tomais, tomais. But it's second to last syllable. Tomo, tomas, toma, tomamos. There's the second to last. Toman. Oh, let's take that harder 3-syllable word I gave you. Platicar. Ooh, that's a little more complicated. Okay. Tomar, 2 syllables. Okay. Ooh. Ooh, I'm going to type them all in. Ooh, I got fat finger syndrome going on big time here today, folks. Okay, let's take a look at this. Oh, shoot, it's a bunch of syllables. But look, last letter is a vowel, S, vowel, S. Uh-oh, watch out, we're going to skip it. N, vowel, N or S, second to last. So, platico, platico, second to last, platico. Platicas, platica. Oh, second to last, platicamos. Uh-oh, we're going to skip that one. Platican. But because this one, this vosotros thing, which you don't have to worry about because it's only in Spain, it breaks the rule. They write, yeah, it's S, but that's not the second to last syllable. That's the last syllable. They write the accent mark over the A. Let's take a different verb. Let's take a different verb. Let's take buscar, to look for. To look for. We're going to ignore this one kind of. We'll just show you what happens with an accent mark. Okay. Oh, last letter. Vowel. Vowel. S. S. N. Vowel letter S. Second to last syllable. Busco. Buscas. Busca. Oh, here comes second to last. Buscamos. Second to last. Buscan. Buscan. Okay. This is an S, but the way people pronounce it breaks the rule. It's punching one of these vowels at the very end, not second to last, but the very end. So we put an accent on the vowel that gets the punch. Buscais. Bien? Does that make some sense to you?
Yes, and it looks like, is it true then that most, all of them are going to be the same with regard to accent because you always have the O, S, or N?
Yeah, so most of the time, there will be a very small number of verbs that have an accent mark on them. Very, very small, very small. There are a few odd ones, and usually it happens because there's a certain combination of a couple of, you don't have to worry about it. No, so bottom line, don't need to worry about it. Don't need to worry about it. Let's look at necesitar. You might not want to say, I need to know something. I need to buy something. I need to find something. Okay. Bien. Necesitar. Shoot, it's a great big long word. Oop. Vosotros, salud.
Gracias.
De nada. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, great big bunch of syllables. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Confusing. No, not really. Let's look at it. Ends in a vowel, ends in an S, ends in a vowel, ends in an S, ends in an N. Oh, wow. Vowel, N or S is the last letter. So second to last syllable. Necesito. Necesitas. Necesita. Ooh, now we're going to shift it because second to last is this one. Necesitamos. So notice amos, amos, amos is always that. Amos. Always. Necesitan. So a common question. You're standing with your significant other. You're standing in a store. And somebody asks, do you need help? ¿Necesitan ustedes ayuda? Do you guys need help? ¿Necesitan ustedes ayuda? They probably won't ask it that way, but they could. They'll probably use a different form, which we don't need to worry about yet. So, ¿necesitan ustedes ayuda? Or you're saying, well, necesitamos ayuda. We need help. Necesitamos ayuda. Necesitamos ayuda. We need help. There it is. Necesitamos. Amos, amos, amos always punches the amos. Bien? Okay? Does that answer that question for you? You have to, yeah. You need to hear the pattern a bunch of times. And it is very, very normal to need to hear that pattern a bunch of times. Muy normal. Okay? So I'm going to show you some more examples of ARs, and then we're going to look at those other three categories real quick. We're going to just look at this page next. Oops, perdón, aquí. Aquí. So here are going to be conjugations, and I'm going to send you this whole file, so you don't need to copy anything down, just so you can. So what I'd like you to do is like practice saying these conjugations out loud this week, okay? We've got conjugations for pagar, for tomar, for cocinar. Here's a long one. So you're going to hear that second to last thing. Cocino, cocinas, cocina, cocinamos, cocináis. We don't worry about that. Well, we're not worried about vosotros. So that accent mark one, skip it. Because unless you're going to Spain, you're not going to use it. Cocinan, right? Let's look at trabajar. Trabajar is to work. Trabajo, trabajas, trabaja, trabajamos. Trabajáis only in Spain, and trabajan. Muy normal. Very, very normal. Okay? Normal. Those are all the conjugations. Bien, 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 bien. Is that my end? That's my end. Okay, that's my last slide. I'm going to send you that whole thing. It went from just giving you the top ones there to seeing if you know them. Okay, so all AR verbs that are regular will do that. So now, the ER and IR verbs, you're going to have also a pattern. So we talked about how we have three categories of verbs. AR verbs, which is like the majority of most verbs in the language. Then ER verbs. ER verbs there are slightly fewer ER verbs than AR verbs, but still quite a few. And then IR verbs. IR verbs, it's a smaller category. It's smaller. It's not as big. There are fewer verbs that fall into that category. Let's take a look at some typical verbs. And right now, the more important thing will be to get familiar with what do these verbs mean. Oops, what do these verbs mean? I need my share screen. Punching the wrong button. And again, I'll send these to you. You're going to start to notice there is a funny kind of pattern that will happen. Again, ER verbs, and here are some examples of verbs that are ER verbs. And again, your chapter 7, after the AR category, it will show you some ER verbs. Here are some common ER verbs. Comer, to eat. Beber, to drink. Correr, to run. Vender, to sell. Comprender, to understand. Aprender, to learn. These are regular verbs and they're ER verbs. Just like the AR verb category, we have to take off the ER first in order to use the verb in the proper form, in order to tell who's doing this verb, this action of eating, drinking. And beber is often used either with agua, water, or alcohol, any kind of alcoholic beverage, yes. Correr, to run, vender, to sell. How do I tell who's doing those actions? First, I need to take off the ER. So I'm left with com, beb, cor, bend, comprend, right? Because I take off the ER, aprend. And these are regular verbs. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to have another table. It's still going to use O for yo. Yay. I don't have to memorize anything differently. O is an ending for yo. Okay. But because they're ER verbs, instead of having AS, they'll have ES because they're ER verbs. Instead of like habla, they'll have that vowel in the ER, instead of amos, they'll have the ER vowel, hemos. Vosotros saludéis. And instead of an, like hablan, they'll have en because they're ER verbs. En, those will be the ending. O, es, hemos, es, which we're not going to use, en. Yes. So notice that S at the end always indicates I'm talking to you, buddy, kind of thing. The little naked vowel off here just says, I'm not an AR verb anymore. I'm an ER verb. Right? Mos always tells a we action. But now I've got hemos, that hemos. The e vowel comes because it's an ER verb. And the N at the end always says more than one person, but instead of hablan, an, it's en, okay? So that's how that shakes out. So let's look at comer, to eat. This is a survival verb because you walk into a restaurant, you want to tell people what you want to eat, okay? Como, yo como, but people won't bother with the yo most of the time. That's just what it matches up with. Como en un restaurante, comes en el restaurante, él come en el restaurante, Teresa come en el restaurante, usted come en el restaurante. Come for one person, whether it's a guy or a gal, or it shares the usted form with guy or gal, one person. Como, comes, come. If we have the plural side, it becomes yo with a bunch of people, is comemos en el restaurante. They usually won't bother with the nosotros part. In uy, coméis, wow, what happened to my funky thing that my accent mark fell off? That should not have happened, coméis, okay? We're gonna skip that one. They eat, any plural group. I'm not talking about them. It's en. Ellos comen en el restaurante, they're eating. I might, instead of saying ellos, they, I might name them. Teresa y Anita comen en el restaurante. I might use it with ustedes, you guys. Ustedes comen en el restaurante. So, como, comes, come, comemos, we, comen, they, or the same one for you guys, comen, igual. Okay, let's see if we can do beber. Let's see if we can do beber, to drink. Ooh, to drink. Often used with alcohol, vino, cerveza, wine, beer, licor, liquor, beber, bebo. Also used with agua, also used with water. Bebo, bebes, bebe, bebemos, beben. Comprender, understand. I understand. Comprendo. If you want to say, I don't understand, it's no comprendo. No comprendo. Comprendo, yo. Comprendes. Comprende, one person. Comprende. Comprendemos. I'm in the group. Comprendemos. And more than one person. Comprenden. Ellos no comprenden. Ellos no comprenden. They do not understand. Okay? Aprender. Aprender. Aprender becomes to learn. Aprender. Aprendo. Aprendo español. I'm learning Spanish. They know you're a beginner. You forewarned them. Aprendo. Aprendo español. Hablo un poquito. I speak a little bit. You see? Aprendo. Aprendes. Aprende, one person. Aprendemos. A bunch of us, we learn. Aprenden, they learn. Vender, vendo, I'm selling. Probably you don't need to say I'm selling. Vendes, vende, vendemos, vending. Okay. Now, they say, we're missing one kind of verb. And you've got the forms there. So again, this little slide set will give you the whole shebang. You may say, wait a minute, we're missing one thing. We got AR verbs. We got ER verbs. Wait a minute, we got that little tail end thing. And that means IR verbs. What happens with those? Yay. The wonderful, wonderful news is that IR verbs that are regular, and sadly, there are a lot of IR verbs that are not regular, but IR verbs that are regular are most of the time going to share the same forms with the ER verbs. So you won't be learning a whole new set of conjugations. There are only going to be two that are different. And really, there's only going to be one for you guys that is different, because the two that are different are vosotros, which we don't use here in this hemisphere. Yay. So we can cut that out. Nosotros will be different. But this is the smallest of the three infinitive categories. The fewest number of verbs are IR verbs, but here are common verbs that are IR verbs, happen to be IR verbs. Vivir, to live. Compartir, to share. Escribir, to write. Describir, to describe. Oh, it's a lot like escribir. Abrir, to open a store, to open a book. For a place to open up, open a door, abrir. Permitir, to permit, to allow. Salir, which is going to be irregular for yo, but for the other verbs it won't be. For the other forms it won't be. To leave, to go out. Okay. They're going to be the exact same thing as the ER verbs, except for nosotros and vosotros. Yay! So it's still going to be O, it's still going to be ES, es, it's still going to be E for an ending, for he, she. It's still going to be N for the they ending. But nosotros gets a different form. Instead of hemos, it goes back to that E sound of the IR. and it becomes imos. Imos. So what does that look like? Let's look at vivir, because a frequent question when you're a visitor is, where do you live? ¿Dónde vives? Where do you live? ¿Dónde vive usted? ¿Dónde vive usted? Where do you live? Vivir, to live, becomes vivo. I live. And they'll skip the yo. Vives, you live, for the tú form, but they'll skip the tú. Vive, for the single unit. Mi familia vive. My family lives, but familia is a singular noun. Mi familia vive en Arizona. Mi familia vive, María vive en Arizona. Usted vive en Estados Unidos. Okay. And look, the only place where it's going to be different from the ER verbs is going to be this nosotros form. Vivimos, we live. Vivimos, vivimos. Vivís, the form they use in Spain for the plural of tú, that becomes vivís, but you're not going to hear it in Mexico, in South America ever. So we're going to skip over that one. And mis padres viven en Arizona. My parents live in Arizona. Mis hijos viven en Arizona. My kids live in Arizona. Okay, bien. So the only one that winds up being the oddball new form is the imos form. Yay. Bien. Vale? So your chapter 7 is going to review all of that. I will send you all of these slides, and next week, because you get a bonus freebie week, yay, next week, we're going to use more of these. And for the weekend, I'm going to send you to this website, and they're going to mix up the ARs and the ERs and IRs. See if you can figure out what conjugation you need to use. Skip the vosotros ones. They don't have many, but like número ocho. You know, if you want to be like super ambitious, you can do número ocho, the vosotros form, but not going to bother. I'm going to tell you what these verbs mean, though. Most of them you will know. Vivir means to live. Comer means to eat. So your job is going to be, what do these infinitives mean in the first place? We're going to practice the forms next week. Comer, to eat. Cantar is this. La, 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 la. Cantar, to sing. Trabajar, to work. Escribir, to write. Tocar is to play an instrument, not a sport, an instrument. Beber, demasiado means too much. My friends drink too much. That's what, and they're talking alcohol there. Okay. Cenar means to eat dinner. They have a specific verb that goes beyond comer. It means eating dinner at that time of day. Cenar, eating dinner. Hablar, to speak. Fuerte means loud. Gritar means to yell, to shout. Gritar. Abrir, to open. Pasarse. The se is just stays se, and it swings up to the front. So don't worry about that one too much. Pasarse means he spends a lot of time sleeping. Abandonar, to abandon, what it looks like. Escuchar, to listen for. Forget the devorar, you're not going to use that. Andar means this, walking, andar. So skip the devorar because that's a useless verb for you. Andar, to walk. Dibujar means to draw pictures, okay? Vivir, to live. Entrar, to enter. Go into is entrar. And quedarse, quedarse is a little bit complicated. So skip anything that's got a se hanging off the tail end as a caboose. Skip that one because that goes a step beyond. You can probably get the answers to check your test at the end to see what they look like, but you don't need to do the ones that have a se hanging off the end. Okay, makes sense to you guys? See? You do a little practice. I'll send you all the files, but your main objective will be to go back over that chapter 7 and kind of review, wow, what do these verbs even mean? Next week, we're going to take pictures and talk about what people are doing in the pictures and turn it into somebody, so-and-so is traveling, so-and-so is eating, so-and-so, what the different activities. And we're going to take those AR, ER, IR verbs and change them into the form to now make it become this person is traveling to the airport. This person is eating spaghetti. This person is cooking a meal. All those kinds of ideas. Make sense? ¿Sí bien? ¿Vale? Bien. Okay. Fantástico. We're going to leave it at that because that's actually